Hey, how are you doing? Well, if you are a parent living in the state of California, pretty soon, if you misgender your kids, you may also have to surrender your kids. Now, for the next, 20 minutes or so, I'd like to talk to you about this, and I am probably going to sound like a nut job, but I'm not. I'm telling the truth. If you are a parent of minor children in the state of California, as we speak at this time, your state, California, is in the process of labeling you a child abuser if you will not affirm your transgender child's gender identity. I mean, specifically, if your son says, I identify as a female, if your daughter says, I identify as a male, and you say, no, you're not. You can make that decision when you're an adult, but at this time, no, you are what you biologically are. Well, if that's your position, then get ready. You may not only lose your parental authority, you might also lose your child. Okay, this is starting to sound like some weird horror fantasy. When I was a kid, full disclosure, I was a sicko. I loved horror movies. I just couldn't get enough of them. One of my favorites was an old 50s horror movie called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This man discovered that there were aliens that were taking over the bodies of all of his friends, all the people he knew, and it was spreading. And he realized, wow, they're going to take over every person in the world. And in the final scene of the film, it shows him running down the street, stopping cars and trying to warn everyone because he knows there's a danger coming. And he's frustrated because he can't get anybody to listen to him. And he is saying, hey, they're coming for you, they're coming for your wives, they're coming for your children, you're in danger. Then he looks into the camera and goes, you're next, you're next. Okay, so uh, let's calm down. Let's look at the facts. And then let's get excited all over again. The California Assembly Judiciary Committee has recently advanced a bill which, quote, makes it clear that affirming a child's gender identity is part of the health, safety, and welfare of the child. Affirming a child's identity is part of the health, safety, and welfare of the child. Meaning, of course, if you are not confirming the gender identity your child is choosing, you are endangering the health and the safety and the welfare of the child. Now, who determines that gender identity? Not you, the child. Okay, right now you can already see the problem. Okay, if you've got a 12, a 13, a 15-year-old, that kid is not even deemed emotionally and mentally prepared to decide whether or not they should go to class. If they're not showing up at class, they get punished for truancy. They are not old enough to smoke cigarettes. They're not old enough to give consent to get married. They're not old enough to get drafted into war. They're not old enough for any of those particular decisions. Shoot, they're not even old enough to skip algebra class, but they're old enough to tell you that they should be taking hormones and have their body reconfigured. Now, this right off the bat, you can see the madness of it. But basically, yes, that's what it is saying. The gender identity determined by the child. So the child says, I am a boy in a girl's body. Therefore, I want to live as a female. Therefore, I will dress as a female, take hormones, maybe even have my body reconstructed. I, the kid, am saying to you, my parents, I am, I want, I will. That's it. That's the child's determination. In fact, the bill, AB957, is titled the Youth Empowerment Act. Well, yeah, I'll buy that. It's a Youth Empowerment Act. It's an empowerment that youth is not prepared for, but it does empower them. Now, as it stands now, it applies to custody cases. Let me make that clear. It's applying now specifically to custody cases. So if there's a custody case, parents are going to court to see who gets the kid. Um, the bill calls on the courts to, quote, strongly consider that affirming a child's gender identity is in the best interest of the child. So now the court is being told officially by the state, you strongly consider that affirming the child's gender identity, whatever the child says it is, that is in the best interest of the child. And that's going to influence custody. It's not only going to influence custody, it's also going to influence visitation. If you're not affirming the child identity or the gender identity your child is choosing, you might not only lose custody, you may even lose proximity. You might be allowed to visit your child, or you might not, depending on what the courts say about your attitude toward his or her gender identity. Now, this is aimed at, quote unquote, protecting LGBTQ youth, encouraging parents to affirm their child's gender identity, and very important point here, it would classify parents in custody battles as abusive if they are not affirming their child's chosen gender identity. Abusive, not just wrong, abusive. Sounds pretty heavy to me. Why aren't we hearing more about this? Well, we are hearing some about it, but here's the narrative. This is the way it's being presented. What I just told you, believe me, those are the facts. That's what the bill says. Now, how's it being translated to make it more palatable to the public? Okay, ABC Eyewitness News made this announcement. Quote, California bill aimed at protecting LGBTQ youth encourages parents to affirm their child's gender identity. Hey, that sounds nice. The bill is aimed at protecting LGBTQ youth by encouraging parents. No, it is telling parents and courts what they may or may not do in light of what the child has decided. Well, here are the facts, not just the narrative, but the facts. According to the Williams Institute at the UCLA School of Law, 0.6% of the population 13 and older identifies as transgender. Okay? Of the entire population of 13 years and older, only 0.6 of that population, which is about 1.6 million that identify as transgender, 0.6. And yet, 1.4% of the population between 13 and 17 identify as transgender. Wait a minute now. Only 0.6 of the entire population identifies as transgender. But when you narrow that group down to the age group of 13 to 17, within that age group, all of a sudden it becomes 1.4%. Now, if you're taking that in percentages of a million, that comes to about at least 10,000 kids between the ages of 13 and 17 who are temporarily identifying themselves as transgender. And that means that, of course, that percentage is going to drop when they become adults. Now, what does that spell? It's not possible that people have a condition at age 13 and then outgrow it by age 17 unless it's not really a condition, unless it is something that's more transitional. So what does this spell out? Social contagion. That's a passing desire. Well, what is adolescence marked by if not passing desires? Different trends, different fads, different ways of dressing, different hairstyles, different taste in music, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever. Social contagion means decisions based on a passing desire. Now, a passing desire that is acted on seriously and permanently, that spells trans regret. If that kid between the age of 13 to 17 has acted on that passing desire and fits into what seems to be a very high percentage of these kids that are identifying as trans, by the time that kid is 17, all of a sudden he or she is going to say, whoops, I guess I'm not really transgender, but what have I done? That spells trans regret, and trans regret spells despair. Those are pretty sobering statistics. Is that stopping the medical community from jumping on the trans bandwagon? Nope, not according to Dr. Marty McAree of Johns Hopkins University. According to Dr. McAree, this astonished me even, and I've been up on this for years. The diagnosis of gender dysphoria, that's the clinical term behind transgender, feeling you are in the wrong body, gender dysphoria, it's increased 300% over the past 5 years. Did you get that? In the past 5 years, the number of cases of diagnosed gender dysphoria has increased by 300%. Now, how the heck did that happen? Is it some kind of a virus that people are catching? Obviously, there is something more going on to this, but again, that's not stopping the medical profession from jumping on this bandwagon because he estimates that by the year 2032, just 10 years from now, 9 years from now, sex change surgeries, the frequency of them will increase by 20%. This is huge stuff. And that alone should cause a parent to say no When a kid says, I'm transgender, hey, you feel that way now? Okay. But you wait until you're an adult and you've had sufficient time to think it through. And when you have the wherewithal, the life experience, and the maturity to make that decision, then and only then will you make it. Well, you would think that's in the child's best interest, but not according to the California Assembly. According to this bill, which the Assembly is strongly considering, what I just said, that would be classified as abuse. Now, here's the kicker. A lot of people are saying, hey, don't get too overreactive about this. Don't exaggerate. This bill is only applying to custody cases. To which I would respond, baloney, wait a minute here now. If according to this bill, it is child abuse to not affirm a child's gender identity, child abuse isn't restricted to custody cases. If something is child abuse, it's child abuse no matter what the context is. If refusing to comply with your child's chosen gender identity is considered abuse in a custody case, it will have to be considered abuse in all cases because child abuse has no contingency. You know that. I mean, come on. If it's child abuse when a parent beats a child until the child is bloody, then it's child abuse when anybody beats a child until the child is bloody. Likewise, if it's child abuse when a parent in a custody battle says, I will not tell my boy that he is a girl, then guess what? It's going to be child abuse when any adult, quote unquote, misgenders a child, whether that's the child's parent, uncle, school teacher, coach, or pastor. If it's child abuse here, it's child abuse here. What's defined as child abuse is illegal in any situation. Well, that's as it should be, of course, provided what is being called child abuse is really child abuse. Well, now, telling your child he is what he is, that's suddenly child abuse as well. Okay, look, this is nothing but state-sanctioned practice of evil. Nothing short of state-sanctioned practice of evil. There's something about evil that leaves us so stunned, we don't think we're really seeing what we're seeing, you know? Kind of like the first time I saw footage of the Holocaust, I thought, oh, I'm not really seeing that. Come on, no, that can't, nobody could do that. Oh, yeah, they could. But see, that's the nature of evil. It's so astonishing, it's easy to dismiss it, which is why it's easy to assume, oh, that can't happen. People wouldn't do that. Well, yeah, they would. And human history has told us they can and will. Well, then you tell yourself that maybe that can happen, but it can't happen here. This is America. We have a constitution. We believe in religious liberty. We believe in parental rights. Oh, sure we do. But there's limitations on all of those freedoms, aren't there? I mean, yeah, we believe in religious liberty, but if your religion calls you to beat a child until the child is bloody, you no longer have that particular religious liberty, nor should you. Okay, that's right. So here's how it works. Look, this movement is not going to dismantle the Constitution by saying the Constitution is wrong, let's do away with it. What it's going to do is basically just redefine the terms and say, look, if somebody is endangering a child, if we can prove to you, because all the experts say it's so, that this is endangering children, well then, we can't allow children to be endangered, can we? That's all you have to do. Convince the public that a certain belief is dangerous to the well-being of children, and the public will say, wow, okay, let's pass laws then supporting that particular belief. So it's easy to assume it can't happen. You'd be wrong. Well, it's easy then to assume, well, maybe it can happen, but it can't happen here. You'd be wrong. Well, maybe you're telling yourself, yeah, it can happen, and it can happen here, but never in my family. You sure? I mean, why are you sure? Because you're raising your kids in the faith, because you're raising them well, because they love you and you love them? Hey, come on now. Do you really think that every kid who identifies as transgender has parents who don't love him or her, wasn't raised in a godly home, doesn't have healthy relationships with the family? Of course they do. Look, your kids, I don't care how well you're raising them, there's something you're never going to take from them, and that is their free will. Don't kid yourself. If it can happen, and it can happen here, and it can, then it can happen in your family. Okay, what is this if not a big hill with a sign on it that says die here? This is a hill worth dying on. This particular bill the California Assembly is considering, it's designed to usurp biology. If your kid says I'm something I'm not, then that is what your kid is. It's designed to usurp parents. If you say no, you were born a boy, you're a boy. No, the bill says the kid knows better than you. It's designed to usurp God. I mean, face it. The bill is saying a 14-year-old kid can say to his creator, you didn't know what you were doing. I'll take it from here. And by the way, I hope you're not comforting yourself just because you don't live in the state of California. How many times have you seen it? It's true. What happens in California eventually spreads to the rest of the country. It will. And like the guy said at the end of the horror film, sounding like a nut job, they're coming, you're next. Well, you know what you are, okay? So, what are we going to do in response? Can I strongly urge two things, please? Say something, pray something. Say something. Everything we just talked about, okay? Would you please share this information? Share this podcast. Share the info you get on it. Make sure the people in your circle of influence know this is what is happening in the state of California. Say something to the people you know. And say something to people of influence. You know, there are a lot of good organizations that are fighting faithfully for your rights as a parent and also for just the freedom to practice Judeo-Christian values. One in particular, a good friend of this ministry, the Pacific Justice Institute. You'll see their link right there. Look up the parental rights section on the Pacific Justice Institute website, and that will tell you what action you can take and keep you informed about this bill and other similar bills. Say something to the people you know, say something to people of influence, and say something to people in authority. Oh, please do not just sit there and let this happen. Look, it's pretty easy to contact your representative, your assembly person. Just go to assembly.ca.gov. If you are a California resident, assembly.ca.gov, and tell your representative, no, this is not what we want. Say something. And then, of course, pray something. You know, and I know this is not a political battle simply. It's a spiritual battle, obviously. What we're seeing in the year 2023 is the systematic dismantling of everything God ordained and created in the book of Genesis. God's authority over the world, the definition of marriage, the definition of life within the womb, and now the very definition of what it is to be male or female, all of these are being dismantled. And as we speak, the windows are closing. The windows on freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. They are closing. There is a very real persecution coming over these very issues, and there's going to be a very high cost that we will pay for taking a biblical position, and I should say a common sense position on these issues. Okay, well, what are we going to run away from persecution? Of course not. Look, if persecution comes despite our best efforts, so be it. We accept that. Jesus said, don't be alarmed, don't be surprised if the world hates you, it hated me. And Paul said, all who live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. If it comes despite our best efforts, so be it. But if persecution comes because of our lack of effort, now that's on us. Because it means it's something we allowed that could have been prevented. So watch and be a watchman. Remember how God warned Ezekiel, if destruction is coming and you refuse to speak up, you'll pay. Right. Well, if destruction is coming and we refuse to speak up, we're going to pay too, in this life and in the next. Let's remember that, okay? Well, as I said, I hope that if you haven't yet subscribed to Christians in a Cancel Culture, that you will. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to know what thoughts you have about the podcast and any topics you'd like us to cover on this. Also, if you haven't yet picked up my book, Christians in a Cancel Culture, that's the book I wrote, which this podcast is based on, and that equips you to have dialogue with people about, the hot button issues: abortion, critical race theory, homosexuality, transgender, progressive Christianity. If you want some tools on how to sharpen your dialogue on these issues, please pick up a copy of that book. And hey, if you would like to partner with us in this ministry, we love providing free content, which I hope is building up the body. That's what we're here for. So if you want to partner with us in that, just go to joedallas.com/giving. That'll show you how you can partner with Cloudfire Ministries. Well, this is Christians in the Cancel Culture. We're here every Friday. I'll look forward to seeing you next week. God bless.